My first question is for Cathy. So your parents talk a lot about the experience of reality, asking what does it mean to feel real, especially when filming. Why do you think the concept of reality is so central to their memories?
It's a good question. I mean, I asked the question to prop it up because I think it's something that I am also interested in, but I think I gathered that from the interviews or from the things that my mother had said, and I think for my parents, their experience as being extras in Apocalypse Now, they felt like they didn't actually feel like it was always, it goes in and out of being real or not real, or being surreal or not. So sometimes I'll press on the questions. I'll be like, did you feel exploited? Did you feel like you were being put back into that place? And then my mother's like, I know the difference between real war and fake war, you know? And then at certain points, like in the movie theater, they're like, oh, it felt like the real thing. So it doesn't really feel stable in that way. So it's a question that I think a lot of people, audience-wise, are really interested in because they want to know if, you know, how did it feel to be in the film? So naturally, it was a question that I asked, and it is a question that my mom thinks about a lot because, like she says, I've heard this like a million times, that she doesn't like watching films anymore because she can see how they're made and they look fake anymore. So I think that there is something about the idea of filmmaking and, you know, like my niece's verisimilitude that is like deeply interesting to me, as well as like interesting to her lived experience. And they're sort of really fascinated by like the machinations of even like my dad being like, you know, 3 days is 10 seconds or something. 1 day is 10 seconds of time in film. So there's something just for them, they're just discovering what it takes to make something seem real when they had experienced something real themselves.
And Christopher, so this is a gorgeous film that you directed. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your approach from the technical side. You know, I thought all the lighting and the present day footage was gorgeous, and you were never felt like a classic documentary with a bunch of talking heads. It felt a lot more dynamic, especially with all the archival footage. So I was just wondering if you could touch a bit on all of that.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you so much for having us. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming out. It's so lovely to see a bunch of people here for short films. That's like really reassuring. We love that. So thank you. And yeah, as far as like the technical aspects, a lot of it kind of was born, the look of the film, the feel of the film, a lot of our sort of aesthetic choices sort of were born from the limitations of the production. Like it was really made by myself, Cathy, and one other person, our other producer and cinematographer, Jess X. And we had very little equipment, and we had to like borrowed some lights from a friend of Jess's, and we just had to light the interior rooms in their house when she's cooking and when he's like, you know, doing his thing at the TV and stuff like. And so it was just kind of like us doing our best to augment kind of like for the camera a little bit what their space looks like without actually like changing it in a way, like because, you know, my approach was really just kind of like I come from a narrative scripted background mostly. This is sort of the first documentary that I've done, and like a really big difference between those two forms is that with a narrative film, you have a script, you have actors, you have like a plan, a shot list, storyboards, like you know exactly how things are going to be lit, and like you have to like execute on that plan. Like with this, we had really no idea. We had no plan and no real idea of what kind of footage we were going to capture, what her parents were really going to say in the interview, and so it was just sort of like a kind of different mental and creative process on our part to sort of open our sort of aperture mentally to be like, let's just gather as much as we can that we think reflects the reality of who her parents are and what their experience was, and allow them to tell that experience in their own voice. And like in a way, like I had to kind of like step back from that and just let their story kind of be their story and not like mess around with it too much, not like impose a filmmaker's hand on it too much. Although I edited the film too, so I feel like my hands are like all over it at the end of the day, but it was all in service of trying to do that, just to come up with sort of like a reflection of, an honest reflection of who they are. Yeah.
And my next question is for both of you. There's a lot of nuance in the film. There's this kind of push and pull between kind of negative feelings towards shooting the apocalypse now, be it memories of war or Francis Ford Coppola's way of eating mangoes. And also, but also when they watch the tape, you can tell they're very proud of the work they did. So I was just curious, or maybe I misinterpreted that, but I was ultimately, what did you want to say with your short? And also, what do you think your parents wanted to say by participating?
I'll do the parents' question first. They didn't want to say anything by participating other than we support you and we'll go along with what you desire. Cathy, as their daughter, I don't think they have any interest in being, in film. They don't have any interest in being, telling their story to a larger, wider audience outside of the internal familial space necessarily. I don't think they've ever shown interest in that or felt like this yearning. I have that yearning, so they are participating in large part in order to, help me amplify a voice that I feel like I didn't get to see growing up. But I don't think that my parents growing up felt like they were absent, like they didn't see their story around them because they were surrounded by Little Saigon TV, or they were rooted in Long Beach, California, which is, and LA, and it was a very strong Vietnamese diasporic community, refugee. So they were surrounded by family and friends and acquaintances, so they saw themselves in media and Little Saigon radio, so the newspaper, so they could see themselves reflected all over. Whereas I was in this space where I didn't see that, and that was that is a large component of why this film is important to me, because I just haven't seen this story told at all. As far as we know, it is the only film about Vietnamese extras from Apocalypse Now from a first-person perspective. So that in itself is very unique and important to be able to tell. I think that for me, it does, for them, they don't feel really erased from the film, because in their mindset, they're just sort of like, we got to participate in something, we got to get paid. It was not being stuck in the refugee camp. It was kind of an adventure. Our friends were there. We had some fun. We made friends. And for me, from my perspective, I'm looking at it like that looks like exploitation. That looks like, because Francis Ford Coppola, like in interviews, would say things like, "Oh, the film was Vietnam. It's not just like about Vietnam. It was Vietnam." And there was a real strong interest in using Vietnamese extras to make it feel real. Like, so back to that question about reality, I think he felt like if there are Vietnamese bodies in it, it makes it more authentic, right? It makes it more real. And so I wanted to make something more real than this like multi-million-dollar production where you, fake the Vietnam War and put Vietnamese people in the background. So I just wanted to sort of make a film where they get to be the center and they get to be kind of the stars of the show, essentially.
But to answer your other question, they do get excited to talk about the film.
Yeah,
and
that's true. That's true.
When we went there to interview them and to ask them to watch the scenes and speak about it and kind of narrate it and give their commentary, they were more than happy and excited to do so, and they had a lot of fun doing it. Like at one point, Cathy's mom was like in the kitchen and the movie was playing, and like she could hear the audio. She's like, "Oh, it's the part with the tiger." And
she runs like
into the So they know the film, and they're kind of like,
for sure.
Like we're like like film people or whatever, so we know Apocalypse Now and we have like a certain sort of regard for it. But I think from like a lay person's perspective who doesn't really have any access to the world of like movie making or what that looks like, it is a really fascinating, interesting thing to participate in. Once in your life, and it becomes just sort of part of your your personal lore. You know what I mean? That, oh, I did this cool thing.
I mean, it is a portal to their memories too, because that time for them is very alive, and their storytelling is how they keep that time alive for me. So it's like kind of anytime we gather and they get to talk about their lives, it's never like a drag. They're just like very happy to do so. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off.
So we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions. Yes.
How difficult was it to get the footage rights to the film?
We're using fair use, so essentially fair use means that you can use footage if it is transformative of the film. So we got a fair use lawyer and a fair use opinion.
Did Coppola ever see the film?
We don't know yet.
Not to our knowledge yet.
Yeah, not to our knowledge
But
yet.
maybe one day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
Do you know what kind of mango it was?
That's a good question, because you know in
Some are
Vietnam,
worse
like
than others, even just
I talked to my auntie, she was like, you know, there's 1,000 types of mangoes. Like, I was, you know, like, or my cousin was saying that, you know, we were eating varieties of mangoes, green mangoes and stuff, and it's like, oh, there's like 1,000 types. But I don't know, I have to ask, like,
What's
exactly.
native to the Philippines?
Exactly, well, there's so many mangoes in the Philippines too. But I mean, I gotta ask the color and the texture, cause like, we gotta get it right, yeah.
Try to reach him for comment.
Thank you for asking.
Yes, way in the back.
In your poetry, you've covered this topic a bit. How different was it for you to explore this subject matter in your poetry versus in a film?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Esteban. Like, no, I'm just kidding. Thank you for asking. The poetry book came first, so I have a book called Becoming Ghost. It came out in April of this year. I have copies for sale in my bag. Come as a good poet, like, who sells like 2 copies at a reading, you know, like, please, like, come talk to me. But the poetry is in English for the most part. There's some Vietnamese, but it's driven by it's very much driven by the language that I have to access, and Vietnamese is my first language, but it's not the one that I can really write in, and it's not how I converse 95% of the time. Like, it's not my audience. Vietnamese people are not my primary audience. So just thinking about the process of doing that, so it's not only just in English, but it's also filtered through my own perspective for the most part. I'm not gonna sort of, in my own poetry book, I'm cycling through different voices, but it is a critical take about, I want to center my parents or family's voices, I want to do this, whereas the film really makes a lot of room for them to tell their own story, their own nuanced, very complex emotions that I wouldn't necessarily assume or take up. Like, I wouldn't necessarily be like, even though they were forced to do it, they had so much fun. I report that they had fun, but it's not that, it doesn't have the same intonation or influence in terms of just springing forth from their own genuine voice or perspective. So I think that there's just less mediation. Even if our hands were all over it in the edit or in the interview questions, ultimately, there's just a lot more. We tried very hard to make the film really showcase their voices and their story and be led by their narrative, whereas the book is kind of, it's their narrative, but it's more strongly mediated through my own narrative and my own feelings about me and my dad. We don't have like my daddy issues in here, like, are completely out of the, like, off of the screen and into the poetry book. So yeah, that's like so that's where yeah, thanks for asking. Do you want to say about
I would just
poetry?
add, well, I can't speak to the poetry of it all, but like, in my mind, like, well, Cathy's poetry and the film are very distinct, but also like from each other. They're like different projects and whatnot. But from a filmmaking standpoint, one of the sort of one of the few kind of guideposts that we had when we went about making the film was that we wanted to evoke Cathy's point of view, kind of in a general way, like kind of in how we shot the film and how we edited the film, because we realized that by having her parents speak in their voice, like she was going to be doing the interview, it was going to be sort of a conversation between Cathy and her parents. And so visually and kind of tonally, we wanted to situate the viewer almost kind of in Cathy's point of view watching the film, and so a lot of the decisions that we made as to like how to shoot the film, like when we went over to Vietnam, like we talked about trying to capture a daughter's perspective, a daughter that is not from Vietnam. What does she see when she goes to Vietnam, when she's heard about these places that her parents were in the Philippines and whatnot? And so like when we were shooting, I would constantly just be asking Cathy like what draws her eye, what does she remember about this place, what sticks in her mind? And that was our sort of subtle way of kind of like trying to, like I said, evoke Cathy's presence, even though our other rule that Cathy kind of was very forceful about was that she didn't actually want to be in the movie physically, you know?
Yeah, my
So,
voice.
Yeah.
Off. Yeah.
Yeah, but just to add that to answer your question.
So that's about all the time we had. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.